Ooh, we're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas podcast. Also, another crossover pod, double dipping Stripe Sports free throws because they're free. Fisher, Tosopoulos. We're talking college football. What was supposed to be the most boring week of college football in anticipation of this upcoming week, which is supposed to be absolutely fantastic. Week 7, we have incredible matchups. Obviously, our OU game, Texas OU, Ohio State, number 2 team now, Oregon, number 3 team. They see each other. South Carolina heads to Bama. We got a couple. What else we got? We got Penn State going to USC, another cross country move. Arizona at BYU, who's now number 14 and undefeated. Cal played a really tight game. They have the undefeated number 22 team Pitt. Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, LSU. This was supposed, in Kansas State, Colorado. This was supposed to be the week that college football lights the world on fire. Except last weekend, what was supposed to be a boring weekend, we saw Mizzou go down, the number 9 team. They got pummeled by Texas A&M. We saw Alabama lose to Vanderbilt for the first time in 40 years. Tennessee went to Fayetteville, lost. Arkansas beat them at the end of the game. Michigan got trounced by Washington on the road. USC got trounced by Minnesota. Not trounced, but they got beat for sure by Minnesota in a major upset. And then Miami didn't lose, but they barely escaped and probably should have lost to Cal. 2 penalties we were discussing over the weekend, a missed targeting call, and then a legal man downfield at the very end of the game when Cam Ward threw the game-winning touchdown in an insane weekend of college football. Biggest surprise for you, and then maybe what are the implications for our Texas Longhorns? You're muted, Toss.
The biggest surprise to me has to be the fact that I'm muted. The second biggest surprise has to be that Bama lost to Vanderbilt. I know it was
Fair
it
answer.
was it was in Nashville, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, history has shown us that Vanderbilt just straight up doesn't beat Alabama, and clearly Alabama put all of their chips on the table of knocking off Georgia last week, and sometimes you fly too close to the sun, and like Icarus, you come tumbling down from there, and that's what happened to this Alabama team, who is certainly more talented and should have walked away from Nashville with the victory. But anything can happen on any given Saturday, and that's why we love college football. And now, as Texas Longhorn fans, Vanderbilt was marked as a win on our calendar, right? And so I think that this program, Vanderbilt, now has decided and determined that they are going to play competent football, and that means that they can and have the ability to beat anyone if they don't bring their best. And so that's just it's just a reckoning, I guess, for any team in college football that thinks they're a lock to go to the playoff, a lock to be, a top 4 seed, and a lock to get the bye in the college football playoff just because they have great recruits, a great coach, a great home field advantage, and a great fan base. Like, that doesn't guarantee anything. And it's not the same BCS that it was in the mid 2000s, where if you lose one game, you no longer can make the big dance and get all the way to the promised land. But it becomes a lot more difficult. And now when you lose against a Vanderbilt for Alabama, those other games throughout the rest of their schedule are a lot more daunting, especially when the opponents are labeled to be quality teams. So you're always supposed to win the ones that you have to win if you're a great team. And then you win the other ones that are more of a toss up. And that's what really determines who can be championship caliber. But very surprising, because I think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. He obviously had them prepared against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. So just a little bit of a mental lapse there by the players and by the staff for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But I mean, is there anyone else like Miami? You and I, yes, they ended up winning that game, but as the 6th seed, to me, they're not the same caliber of team as the rest of those 5 teams that are ahead of them. Even Penn State. Penn State has been fantastic. And I know we knock them a lot, but I think this is the 5th year in a row where they've started off 5-0. And they deserve some due credit for that, because that's an impressive resume that they're building there. And then Oregon, obviously, they started slow, but what they've turned into, and we'll find out a lot of things about this Ohio State-Oregon matchup this coming weekend. But to me, Ohio State's the favorite in that game. They should be. How does Oregon play them, right? How can they keep stride with the Buckeyes, who have so much talent offensively? Will Howard, like, a lot of people knocked them for bringing him in because he wasn't the most quality quarterback in the transfer class, but he's played a lot of football and
He's
he
putting it
knows what it
together.
takes. Yeah, and he looked really really good last week, and he's had a really solid season thus far. So, um, as a Longhorn fan, I'm optimistic, but I'm also, there's no looking in the rearview mirror and there's no looking too far ahead because we have to take care of what's in front of us. And it's a really talented Oklahoma defense with a quarterback that can run, something that is given the Texas Longhorns fits in past, and
Did last year.
it did last year. So it's just the chaos of college football more than anything. Am I surprised by certain things? Yes, but should we be? I mean, this is how it goes. This is what happens. Like you can talk yourself into any narrative, and that's the beauty of college football.
Yeah, I think from a Vanderbilt standpoint, they started off 2-0, one of those wins being Virginia Tech, another team that took Miami to the brink so far this season. And many people thought that was a controversial win. Then they won their second game handily. They lost to Georgia State. Like, okay, this is the old Vandy team. But then they played Mizzou really close. But like, all right, maybe Mizzou's overrated. Mizzou gets blown up by an A&M. Mizzou's not a real contender, not who we thought they were. But this Vandy team is better than Vandy teams in the past, and I think they caught Kalen DeBoer sleeping. I think we saw earlier in the season with Notre Dame after they got a gutsy win against A&M. They were on their high horse. What happened the weekend after that? They lost it in Northern Illinois in a shocker. I think Alabama got caught sleeping. They had a Georgia hangover, it looked like. And that's going to happen with a decent football team. Next thing you know, they put up 40 points on you. You're supposed to be Alabama. You still are Alabama. You still have great defensive players. And I don't know if Nick Saban, the reason why Nick Saban wouldn't have lost that game, he would have let up 40 points. So that's something Kalen DeBoer has to go look in the mirror. Yeah, he put up 35, but he has to look at the defense and he's got to get things sorted because he's the head coach of that team.
Yeah,
From a Tennessee standpoint, they played OU tight. Arkansas is a tough game. That's a tricky place to go, and I'm not thoroughly shocked that they beat them. I wouldn't say that's a surprise. I would say USC was kind of surprising. They ailed against Michigan, and I'm not surprised Michigan lost either. But they ailed against Michigan, and I thought that was a tough place to play, a tough defense. I thought they'd bounce back and play nicely. And losing in Minnesota is a little tricky, and I think we're going to see some of that. A lot of the travel is weird, which is why Oregon's cooking at the right time, getting things together. Ohio State's on fire. I do believe they are the second best team in college football behind us, but they have to go all the way to Eugene. I think that matters. I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see
I think
that
it
make a
it just
difference.
it just did for USC, right? Like them having to
Just did for
travel
USC.
all the way
Just
to
did for
Minnesota.
Miami.
Yeah, and let's say this too about, yeah, that's a great point. Cal defended their home territory really well, I thought, and they're not the same slot. I mean, yes, Cal. We saw Jared Goff when he was there, and he was really really impressive. Obviously, those teams where they had a stretch of running backs who really carried their teams in the late 2000s and then the 20 teens basically. Um, but relatively speaking, in the last 5 years, Cal has been a bit of a breeze for teams that are competent 8 out of 10 or better college football
Mm-hmm.
teams. And same thing as Vandy, right? Like you put things in place, NIL changes everything. And if you're in a big conference and you're a school that has a lot of money, right? And you're a school that has a great brand and great academics, like that's a sell too to get kids to come to play for you, whether it's, from high school or transferring from other schools. And so Cal and Vanderbilt have taken advantage of the portal, and those teams are not going to be as easy as a W as they were in years past. That's part of this new era of college football as well. But the Arkansas game against Tennessee, some of that is you have to play your opponent. And by that, I mean you have to lean into what they are not good at. And you have to take advantage of opportunities that are presented to you and your team that can put them at a disadvantage. And for Arkansas, that was running the football, and that was not winning the time of possession battle against the Tennessee Volunteers. And then it was forcing Nico to, as the new quarterback for this Tennessee Volunteers team, make a play at the end of the game. The interesting thing about all three of those games, the Miami game, the Tennessee game, and the Minnesota USC game, is they were all determined by the last drive, every single one of them. And it just so happened that the Volunteers and Nico I fell short, right? It just so happens that Miller Moss threw a pick in the end zone to seal the deal at the end of the game. Like they had opportunities to tie, take it to OT. Maybe you go for two and you call it a game right then and there, but they weren't able to execute. And ultimately, I think it has to do with the coaching staffs for the Minnesota Golden Gophers and the Arkansas Razorbacks and what they did throughout the entire game to put themselves in a position where they made it tougher on the higher quality team to then beat them. And it look, all that to say, you look at this Texas OU game, if OU plays solid defense and they run the football, they put themselves in a really good position to limit the opportunities that Quinn Ewers and Sark's offense will have. And if you give us too many opportunities, we will make you pay. That we're that
Yeah,
type of offense.
100%. I will say though, you brought up what is one of the most, to me at least, glaring things we're seeing this season for teams that are getting upset or close games: time of possession.
Yeah.
Not only do you hold on to the ball, you're keeping them out of rhythm.
Yeah.
Like if Quinn Ewers has the ball an even amount or most of the game, he's going to work himself into a rhythm where he could pick you apart. Arkansas had the ball 35 minutes to Tennessee's 34 plus, obviously, so they added the 60. That's huge. That makes a massive difference. And I'm from a Texas standpoint, the games we thought were gimmies or like easier games, Arkansas, Vandy, Kentucky, we're lucky that we're seeing these teams on full display. Kentucky upset Ole Miss, Vandy upset Alabama, and Arkansas upset Tennessee. We've seen all that go down.
And A&M, who we play at the end of the season, upset Mizzou.
Yes, and they look, and Elko's a good defensive coach, and he knows, he's obviously, have the mindset of how to beat us, control the ball. So
Right.
I think we're going to see, first of all, a two loss team in the college football playoff for the first time. There's just too many moving parts. Like Oregon, someone's going to have to lose against Oregon, Ohio State, obviously. What if Penn State drops to USC, but then they beat Ohio State? I mean, things just can get really. Clemson all of a sudden is back at number 10. Ole Miss is in the mix. Bama, but Bama has to see Tennessee. Iowa, like the whole Big 12, Iowa State, Utah, BYU, Kansas State, Colorado. Like these are all really interesting teams. Pitt, SMU. Like SMU is dangerous, man.
Yeah.
SMU is not. They beat Louisville. They beat Florida State. They crushed TCU. Barely lost to BYU. SMU is a really dangerous team all of a sudden. And now in a 12-team playoff, like all these games matter. Like everyone's like, oh, the games matter less. I actually think the games matter more with a 12-team playoff. More opportunity to get in, but more chaos can happen. Like you could punch your ticket with a big win and you have 2 losses. Like I'm looking at SMU's schedule right now. SMU has Pitt later on in the season in
Yeah.
Dallas.
Yeah.
That could determine a playoff spot based off where things stand right now. And Pitt is no joke.
Certainly. Certainly.
They have
Yeah.
like they have a 5-star quarterback in Eli Holstein, who was at Alabama and transferred when the job was, Jalen Milrose once again. So he's at Pitt, but he's a talented player in the NIL era. That could happen. And you could go to a place, get a starting job, good program, good opportunity to win. So college football has been obviously lived up to the hype. We have 2 kids right now running away after Jalen Milrose's loss. I mean, a lot can change. Cam Ward obviously still in the mix for a lot of people, but I think in our opinion on our show, 2 kids running away with the Heisman right now: Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty. Ashton Genty, just week in, week out, his performance is ridiculous. He's averaging over 10 yards a carry. He's got 16 touchdowns, less than 100 carries, over 1,000 yards. Travis Hunter is playing like
Crazy.
Travis Hunter's playing lights out football, has a good fun test against a good, a decent Kansas State, a really decent competitive Kansas State team. They're ranked this weekend. And I, as of right now, I don't know who you give it to. I really think both kids are so deserving, and I wouldn't mind a tie. Like I know that's kind of unprecedented and unheard of, but I think both kids should win it. Both kids deserve to be obviously in New York at this point in time in college football. But
Mhm.
what both kids are doing, I have not seen dominance like this from a running back ever. I don't
Yeah.
think, and then I've never seen what Travis Hunter's doing.
Yeah. I mean, Boise State obviously is the 17th ranked team in the country. Colorado still unranked, right? And
Mhm.
this is a huge season defining game, as you mentioned, against Kansas State. So if they beat Kansas State, they likely will be ranked, in my opinion.
100%.
And that would be, of the 2 teams that these guys both play for, the most quality win.
Mhm.
Now, yeah, I agree with you with Janty. Like, statistically, of course, I don't think we've seen anything like this as long as the 2 of us have been watching college football. But also the tape too, watching the actual plays, they are Heisman caliber moments. almost
Mhm.
every single touchdown run for this kid. I mean,
Yeah, you said that the other day.
his first touch was a 63-yard touchdown run. Like, it's ridiculous what these guys doing. And Nick, who's been talking with us, and we've all been, watching this guy since the beginning of the season, was saying, like, it's not, he doesn't just break him. He doesn't break these long runs with just speed and get to the edge and run past
Mhm.
safeties. Like, he's breaking 3, 4 tackles, and then he's beating him down the field with his speed. I mean, he's only 5'9". He's an absolute house. He's huge, but he's not
Yeah.
tall. So it's really impressive what he's doing. I personally, as much as I think Ward should get a ton of the credit for that comeback win against Cal, I think I'd still have Milroe ahead of Ward. That game
Mm.
against Georgia is the best win thus far in the college
Shouldn't go
football season.
unnoticed.
And he wasn't great. I mean, he threw for an interception, but he still threw 300 plus yards, had a touchdown on the ground. They actually, what was
Mhm.
most impressive about Vanderbilt's defense was they limited him to only 10 rushing yards, which that's the least he's had in a game thus far this season. But Milroe's still very much in the hunt, in my opinion. And
Mhm.
as I've been saying since the beginning of the season, I think that the wins and the losses, the record will matter for Colorado when it comes down to Travis Hunter, because what's going to happen in the conversation and the zeitgeist around the Heisman and around college football in the second half of the season, we're going to not pay as much attention to teams that aren't in the mix. And that's just going to be, that's par for the course, right? So
They're 4-1.
absolutely. If they lose their next two, then they're 4-3. And then guess what? We don't care as much about them. That's just how it goes. But I think, who do they play after Kansas State?
Let me pull it up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think with him, like, it's a little different. Obviously, people will still be beating the drum the entire season long because there is a majority of people believe that he is the best player in college football and could end up the 1-1. Yeah, who do they play?
If they have if they beat Kansas State, they're going to be ranked. They'll be 5-1.
Yep.
Then they go to Arizona, where he's up against McMillan, the number one like pure wide receiver in the draft. You want to talk about Heisman moments? You beat Kansas State, Avery Johnson. That's your Heisman moment right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh okay, and then with Janty, it's just about sustaining
Yeah,
and look,
maintaining.
they're limiting the touches for him, really. Like,
Yeah,
if they wanted, because they want to compete, and so they
yeah.
want
They're
him.
not exactly. They can't run him into the ground. They
But
don't
they
have to.
but if they did, though, what would his numbers look like?
I mean, he's played
Like, if we're
16 quarters.
yeah, if we're playing college football 2025 and we have Janty on our team, we're running him all 4 quarters, and he might have double the yards he has right now.
I mean, he would have over 20 touchdowns.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm excited to get into Texas OU talk later this week with
Mm,
Quan and
yeah.
Nick. Get those guys back in the fold.
Mm.
You kind of, as you laid out the games for this upcoming weekend, this LSU Ole Miss game is might be the
Paramount.
might be the third
No,
biggest game of the week.
it could be the second. Quite frankly, like that could both teams have one loss.
Right.
Bama also, like, if LSU wins, they could snag a spot from Bama. It's no longer all right. Alabama beat Georgia, and like if they lose to LSU, so whatever. Like that's their one loss. No, now they
Well,
drop a game
well,
to Vandy.
let's also talk about 3 weeks ago. We said, okay, if 5 teams make it from the SEC to the college football playoff, or even if it's just 4, the teams were Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and one of Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Mizzou. We didn't believe in Mizzou. We thought that they would be the team that would get booted. Okay, so
Yeah,
then it was 5. We had those. If it was 5, it was Tennessee and Ole Miss. If it was 4, it was probably Tennessee. I think we discussed at the time. LSU can now jump Tennessee and Ole Miss with a huge
easily.
heroic win. They lost to USC, who's a really quality team, who's still going to end the season, in my opinion, as a ranked squad. So this is a really big moment here, and obviously Lane Kiffin was focused on the Vandy game, so I don't know if he has his team prepped and ready to go for this LSU
That
Tiger
was an
squad,
amazing clip.
who has a quarterback who has also put up really big stats
He's playing
and
for draft status.
draft status.
Nussmeyer.
Look, he might work his way into my top 5 if he's able to have 350 plus yards against Ole Miss with 3 touchdowns and some heroic moments. Like, he's had a really good year.
Yeah, he's been incredible.